Ingrid, I am so excited to have you here. Honestly, I love your social media. I absolutely love it. It's so wonderful to have you here. But for those people who might not know you, tell everybody who you are and why you might be chatting to me today.
The reason I think I'm here is because I am a coach for parents of trans kids. I am also the mom of a trans daughter and young adult, 28. And I work with parents who, just by nature of the fact that they're in a conversation with me, are open to moving forward, but feel very stuck, don't know what's required of them, don't know how to manage things, and want to be supportive of their kids, but sometimes are even undoing harm that they've inadvertently caused in their relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And what kind of reactions? I mean, you mentioned undoing some mistakes that they've made because so many parents are not expecting those words, or they thought it might be someone who they might be gay, or they knew their kid was a bit different, but whatever. But those that kind of shock, and you only get one chance at the first shock, if you like. And I find that so sad actually, because you don't get to replay that. And that might live with you for a very, very long time. And that's just because we're not prepared, we're not educated. No one taught, I'm a mum and no one taught me about this, you know. So how do you manage those mistakes that we can't have another go at? Because they're very sad, aren't they?
They are, and parents are really hard on themselves. And in some cases, the kids are really hard on their parents for making any missteps. Sometimes they're not. And to be honest with you, the kids that are not upset with their parents for missteps sometimes worry me more. When a parent says, "Oh no, they were very forgiving," I sometimes think, is that what really happened there? Or is your child absorbing in order to protect the relationship that they have with you? I'm going to say, first of all, that I think we are educated about this in a way before our kids tell us, but not in the right way. The water I swim in, I'm a late born boomer, like the last year of the boomers, and most of the parents I work with are either Gen X or late boomers. We did get lots of input about trans people, and none of it was good.
Yeah.
So it's not like we're coming at this neutral, like, I don't really know about this, but now I'm going to get informed. We actually come at this often with really negative
Yeah.
perceptions of what it means to be trans. And then we listen to the news, and that's reinforced. There was a period where it wasn't so much, but now it really is. And I do think that there is room for second goes. I do think kids are often willing to give their parents a second try if the parents come into it the right way. So mostly what I would do with a parent is help them figure out what went wrong, what their kid may have told them, what their kid may not have told them, but that they can see signs of in the relationship having shifted or changed, or their child withdrawing or seeming very unhappy and heavy with their parents after telling. Or in some cases, and you may have experienced this as well with parents, they haven't brought it up a second time. The parents are just hoping it'll go away by itself, and they see their child is not happy. Is that they have to start by figuring out what they're feeling, what resistance is inside them, what has led them to believe the things they believe, what are some of the actual truths around being a transgender person. Um, and then once they've put some of that out there and, shone a bit of a light on it and taken some of the shame away, they're better able to not come to their child from a place of defensiveness. So then the next step would be for them to approach their child and ask almost literally, can we do that again? Can I try again? I understand so much more what I did and what the impact may have been. Can I have a second go at expressing my support, my love for you? And it's amazing to me how human brains work, that we think that if we have to ask for something, it won't mean the same to us. If I have to ask you to tell me that you love me and support me, then you don't love me and support me. And in fact, the brain doesn't really work like that. When you hear the words, they almost matter just as much, and sometimes matter more, because you recognize the work that the person did to come forward. And that repair can actually lead to the relationship being stronger. But the key is parents listening, hearing their kid, and staying out of defensiveness, which is really challenging.
Yeah. I love that. It's not too late. You don't only get one chance at it. You can ask, have a think, get ready, do the bit education that you need, get yourself prepared, and then have another go. I love that. I think that's a really beautiful, wise thing to say. Sorry to interrupt. Interested in knowing more? Come over to my website. There's so much more there. Deeper dives, more information, the truth, the reality, and the beauty about gender diversity. It's interesting that the education that we have is poor, and at the moment it's very negative. And I had a mum the other day who came to my website, and she had a 4-year-old, has a 4-year-old, and the 4-year-old was just, this is what mum was saying. The 4-year-old was just loving it. I'm a girl. I just happen to have a boy's body. No problem here, you know.
Gotta love little ones.
And it made my heart sing with joy. But then mum was like, but she tells people in the street, and she's like, I don't know what they're going to say to her, and I don't know what their reaction's going to be, but I don't want to curtail her because that's her identity and that's who she is, and she's skippy and happy, and she's got no problem with the fact that she's got a boy's body. It's just something that she's got, a boy's body. It doesn't matter. But mum was doing the fearful bit, and she didn't know. So at the moment, mum was saying that she doesn't curtail it. She just lets it and winces a bit for fear for her daughter. But then she was thinking, should I pull back a bit?
My favorite thing about the young kids is that they're not in a box. They don't know what the rules are, especially of 4-year-olds. And I love that trans kids who have space and are being heard as their gender identity is becoming known to them, they share it so confidently without, it's probably the only period in which people come out where they feel like they don't know that there could ever be anything negative in other people's responses. And I feel like our job as parents, educators, therapists, whatever it is to help them not find that box until it's inevitable. You know,
Yeah.
the more years you have without those rules, the more strength you'll have in your self-esteem, your confidence, your knowledge of who you are, and your trust of your most important caregivers. So if I was talking to a mom in that context in sessions, I would probably take her down the path of what would the outcome be? What would happen if you take this action, this impulse that you have to protect your child from other people judging, down a path? Where would we get to?
Yeah.
And then, which she's probably imagined 1,000 times, what that might look like, how that might be protective. And then let's look at what it looks like if you do curtail your kid. And at the end of the day, if your child gets to, say, 20 years old, no matter what has happened with their identity, if they have learned at 4 that other people's comfort is more important than their own, that their truth or their, them being just honest and joyful about who they are is less important than making other people ruffled, the outcome is typically lower self-esteem, lower self-efficacy, a lack of self-trust, lack of resilience, all things which, if any generation needed, this one does.
Yeah.
If you follow the other path, maybe your kid goes through some prickly moments, and maybe some of those moments are really painful for them. But the long term is that those painful moments were ridden with you right by their side, helping to support and protect them, perhaps even directly speaking back to someone who says something nasty. They hear that you're always on their side and you're willing to advocate for them. And they see that you prioritize their joy, their comfort, their identity, their sense of who they are, that you believe them. And what do they get from that? All of those qualities that they need to thrive in the world.
Yeah.
And this might be a funny comparison, but I think of like my kids were pretty, they're both young adults now, but they were pretty conservative teenagers. They didn't drink or go out partying and that kind of thing, partly because of COVID. And I worried about their first time doing those things being when they left the home, because there would be no container for them to come home to and have someone guide them and support them. And I think similarly, I would way rather my kid pushed the boundaries and maybe had someone do something unkind while I'm standing right there.
Yeah.
Then know that when they were 27 and they finally came out and they were finally out in the world and free of my restraints, that they had to face that, and I was nowhere to be seen.
Yeah, for sure. And I think alongside that as well is, we had this funny when our National Health Service clinic was open, we had this funny rule in that we made up in the UK that you had to have blockers for a year, and then you wouldn't be able to start hormones until you're kind of over 16. In reality, much later, to be fair. So it plunged every single teenager into this menopausal state, which was horrible, especially when you're trying to do school. But more importantly, I think the lesson I learned was it gave them a really late puberty. And so all of that you were just talking about, that risk-taking behavior, that learning how to drink, drugs, sex, rock and roll, and all of that came much, much later when they were outside of the parental home.
Right.
And we want our kids to experiment while we can at least hold on to them if they get it wrong, so I think there's an analogy there with that as well.
And that's interesting because as a lay person, not a doctor, and earlier on in my kids' transition, before I started doing this work, I read a lot about puberty blockers, and they seemed to be touted to parents very much as a way of holding things steady so that their kid could figure it out.
Yeah.
And it seemed much more that what it actually was a way of holding things steady while parents figured themselves out.
Yeah.
Because kids who are reaching puberty and puberty blockers are an option or are being talked about typically have already been living in this identity for a while.
Yeah.
That a kid that's been told no from the beginning or who has not spoken up is not going to be in a doctor's office talking about blockers. That's just not going to happen. It's always after a process of social transition or social identity, gender affirming identity. So really, that hold isn't for the kids.
No.
So again, I think one of the reasons I do this work is that I learned early on in my own education after my daughter came out that we want to take time. Parents want to take our time, and our kids are at risk. They're in harm's way. The analogy I sometimes use is it's like someone said to me, "Oh, your baby's in the road, maybe going to get run over by a car." And you're like, "Well, I'm just folding laundry. As soon as I'm done, I'm going to head out there and get them." No, you have to do it now.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you have this chorus in your brain that's telling you to put the brakes on. And that's where coaching or some kind of support system can help you process that stuff more quickly and also simultaneously.
And also, I mean, it's the trajectory that you just kind of talked about there, the self-realization that the child themselves will go through first, even before they tell mum and dad. And then the social transition, once mum and dad have caught up a bit and got, oh, phew, or parents have caught up a bit, phew. And then people say, oh, well, if you let them socially transition, they all go into puberty blockers. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, yeah. And then, oh my goodness gracious me, if you let them all go on puberty blockers, they're all going to want hormones. And it's like, yeah. And I just want to say to parents listening, it's because we got it right. It's because that child had the journey that they were allowed to be on. People giving them permission to be who they are and have the body that matches their gender identity. It's not a negative, it's a positive. And I don't want to dwell on negative, the stuff, but I do know that parents worry about that. If I let my kid do this, will it mean I can't get off the train, kind of thing? Do you see that much?
Oh, for sure. I mean, every age of kid, their parents, it doesn't even matter if the kid is 50. Parents say things, literally say the words, if I give permission, if I allow, if I let. And one of the things, especially when the child is a teenager or young adult or older adult, is that really the question? Are you being asked to allow or let or give permission? Or is this actually your kid telling you who they are and inviting you to get on the train and go with them?
Yeah.
Be there, provide that container that safe container you were talking about, which even a 50-year-old often wants from their parents. And when we're talking about someone who's come forward or spoken up at 4, I'm not sure if where the doubt would be. You're talking about someone who's gone from 4 to puberty. If they've had all those years, what's another year on puberty blockers going to give you that you didn't have before puberty?
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing that I didn't know anything about until I started this work was non-binary identities. And I get it. It's a little bit tricky to get your head round because we just weren't taught it. It didn't enter the books when we had our children's books, when we were reading. So I'm interested in what kind of age have you come across children saying, well, actually neither fit me. It doesn't work out like that. And or is it only when the language comes in that is a thing that you can be? Do you know what I mean? So is it when they understand the label, or do they actually say from a young age, I don't know what I am because I'm not either? I'm interested.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you first, my client base is 95% trans, not non-binary.
Okay.
And the ones that by the time they come to me, there are quite a few who their kids went through a phase of non-binary. So sometimes that identity is and kids perceiving it as easier for their parents somehow.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what it is. Sometimes it's a figuring out that they aren't sure yet. And that's a path. That's part of the path for themselves. And they're open to their parents all the way. So this is not coming from my experience with my clients so much, but more with, I work with PFLAG. So I meet many trans people through the community. I also made it a point when my daughter came out, the first time I met some openly trans people, I realized how much that affected me. And so I've, really embraced knowing my daughter's friends, meeting other people. So it's more through them. And then being a teacher, hearing about it in school. I think young kids sometimes can express a non-binary identity without the language. In a way, being uncomfortable with the language of either, or being more fluid. I had a kindergarten student who was probably expressing more of a trans masculine identity, but did come to school in the morning sometimes, and kids would say, I would listen to his best friends say, are you a boy today or a girl today? And occasionally this child would say, I think maybe I'm going to be a girl today. Most of the time it was masculine. And I think because of their family, there was a bit of exploration happening. But I think their parents need the language.
Yeah.
When the child is expressing discomfort with both boy and girl, when parents learned the term non-binary, they were capable of being like, could this be happening with my kid? And could start to figure out the clues of what this might mean. And often that means being more open and being ready to hear what your kid has to say. For older kids, most definitely, when they're teenagers and they start expressing this, I think most definitely it's they hear the language. They learn from their peers. They hear all of the subheadings under non-binary and outside of the binary that allow them to refine their sense of who they are more and more and more. And I think that is for sure that you introduce the concepts are available and they can find who they are.
Yeah.
And we hear this also in 40-year-olds and 50-year-olds. And I mean, some pretty important people out there that I follow have started talking about this, that they feel this is actually their identity at 50 because they never felt right.
Yeah.
And incredible how powerful it is to feel right.
Absolutely. The next thing I want to ask you about is great grandpa Joe and great auntie Flo and the uncles, the aunts, the grandparents, the people that have been there forever, but they just don't get it. And either they don't get it quietly or they don't get it in spades. And what do parents do? Because do you know what? As I've got through life, I'm like less and less tolerant. I'm like, give them a chance, explain it, give them some literature, and then do you know what? Tell them to piss off if they can't get it, because my kid's more important. But you probably have a kinder way of talking parents through that. I don't know. I'm interested.
It's not kindness, it's coaching. So
Oh,
coaching is definitely not me leading.
uh-huh.
It's definitely supporting a client to figure out what it is they want and what they can live with and what they're ready for. I do step in with their permission to a consulting role sometimes and give advice or suggestions, but it would be much more likely, what would be the language of saying something to great grandma or to Uncle Joe about a boundary that you're setting or an expectation that you have, or that the relationship is no longer viable. I would maybe support them around that. I would never be saying to a client, sounds like Grandma Joe is awful, and that's the end of Grandma Joe. You need to kick her out. That has
Yeah.
to come from them. And part of that is tons of research that shows that advice that comes from outside of yourself is almost never followed. So that's the first thing I'd say. In general, first of all, I tell all my clients, and I say this on Instagram all the time, the bulk of the surprises are for the people that I know have been positive. So, and sometimes we're talking huge surprises, like, really right wing, very conservative families, very religious, and grandma is like, okay,
Yeah.
I don't know how this works, and I guess I'm going to leave my church, but this is my grandkid. And that, it's not that that's common, but when you're surprised, it's more that than that you get surprised that someone who you expect to be supportive is now not supportive. I do find that parents of a younger generation, so more millennial parents who have younger kids, there seems to be a bit more of a trend to hard and fast, like they weren't on board, they're out. I typically work with families more on, what does this relationship mean to you? How important is it? What are the effects of this negative behavior on you and more importantly on your child? How can you protect your kid? And then steps towards possibly moving forward in a more positive way. And I have found that the most important step is making your expectations very clear and very simple. So, for example, and this is a weak example because my own father, who's 93, is 1000% supportive, like loves my daughter and has done nothing but be supportive. But he had a lot of struggles around name and pronoun. And she didn't mind, but I minded. And being very clear with him that this was my expectation, that he correct this, make his best effort, not be mad at him, but just say, this is an expectation I have, and telling him that it was negatively impacting me because then I would make mistakes more because I'd been around him, and that had a really negative impact on my child, made all the difference. He shifted. So I often coach people, tell them exactly what, in simple language, your granddaughter is transgender. She's going by she, her. This is her new name. And I expect you to use those. And I'm asking for your support. Often has a positive impact.
Right.
And another is letting them learn. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think sometimes we accept our own struggle to get there. And then when we're there, when we're supportive and we've got our feet firmly planted and we tell others, we're like, well, why aren't they on board right away? But we had a bit of a
Yeah.
learning curve.
Yeah.
So giving them the chance
Yeah.
to have messed up and repair, giving them time to process what they need to, giving them access to learning materials. But then at the end of the day, if they're going to cause harm to your kid or to you, what option do you have but to make changes in your
Yeah.
social circles?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd not really thought of that before because I've always thought about the impact on the trans person themselves. But actually, by sharing that, it impacts me as a parent as well as my child, your grandchild, and it impacts their brother or their sister or their sibling. I think that's a really interesting concept. I hadn't thought of that before, and it is true. And actually, I guess it's helpful that the child's not the only one at risk here. There's others at risk if we don't get this right, and I guess that's less othering for the trans person. That we're all at risk, if you like.
100%. And Helen, I think too, I'm not a grandparent yet. My mother was an incredible grandmother, but she talked quite a bit about the fact that a grandparent role is different than a parent role.
Yeah.
And that as grandmother, She had a very warm, beautiful relationship with her grandchildren, but she didn't have to parent them. And so she had permission to not always get everything right. And I'm not talking about gender here. I'm talking about, giving them treats before dinner or whatever, which I mostly would have indulged. She passed on before my daughter came out, but my dad gets permission from my daughter to not be as good as he should be because she sees him as older and maybe unable. And she's, he's so wonderful and lovely that she'll give him permission. And he takes it and he wants it because he's her grandfather. But I'm his daughter.
Yeah.
I'm his kid.
Mm.
When he's relating to me, even when he's 93, he relates to me as a parent. So calling older people to that relationship, and I'm not talking about older people meaning older people are closed-minded, but if that is the impact, saying to your great aunt, it isn't about your great nephew or niece, it's about me.
Mm.
You were a supportive figure in my life and I need your help.
Yeah.
Sometimes calls them to a place of greater responsibility.
Yeah. I went to learn from Joanne Olson Kennedy and her husband, who is actually a trans guy, and he was telling us about coming in and coming out, and he was saying that coming out, and we were talking about the trajectory a minute ago, and coming out is when you tell like one person or many people, and obviously there's a whole different experience of that. But what he was talking about was the process of coming in before you come out, and actually how exhausting and informative. There's obviously positives to it, but actually how exhausting it can be. And the image that he left us with was this kind of teenage child at school, trying to do their exams, trying to learn about social interactions, trying to fit in, trying not to be a weirdo, trying to just be ordinary, and then at the same time coming in and all of the emotions and the information and the knowledge and the oh my goodness, what's this going to mean for me? And it was just like, it was chaos in that child's brain, while someone else is saying, well, you haven't done your homework very well. And it's like, oh, and I'll never forget it. It was just, I feel exhausted even thinking back on it now.
And in my comments, I have a lot of followers who are trans kids. And when I say kids, I don't mean young children.
Yeah.
I mean offspring of any age. So
Yes.
could be a 60-year-old. The most common emotion that is reported in my comments is tired or exhausted.
Yeah.
That this is exhausting. That it is, it's such a weighty burden on your nervous system. And it is exhausting, which is one of the reasons parents are called to do their own education and to learn on their own and to try to evolve and manage their resistance or emotions on their own, as opposed to handing those to their kid. And it's amazing, Helen, how often parents say, my kid doesn't understand how hard this is for me. And I think, or don't just think, I've said, would you say that sentence with another thing that your kid was going through? If your kid was going through some kind of other uncovering, and this is a negative comparison, and trans is nothing like this. But for example, if your child was battling an illness, would you ever say to your child as they deal with that, this is so hard for me. How come you can't understand how hard this is for me? And of course, parents immediately are like, no, I never would. So bringing that burden off their kid and carrying it themselves and not demanding of their child that they understand the parents' struggle is a huge, huge shift. And since you're talking about coming out, one of my favorite things that happened with my own daughter when she was young is I asked her at one point, at this point, she was not identifying out loud as trans, but was exploring her sexual orientation more. And I asked her if she was out to a teacher at school. And she said, out? How could I be out? I was never in. And what she meant by that was I had never said I'm cis or straight, or I had never identified as anything. I'm just a person. And this idea of coming out involves you assuming things that I have to now break out of.
Yeah, that's lovely. Good on.
Yeah,
Good on
I thought so. As a parent, adapts a little bit when our kids speak so honestly about things like that.
For sure. You said two words at the beginning. You said suicidality and self-harm. Now, I have a thing that we don't talk about that enough. And on the internet, we're somehow, there's, I don't know if it's a written rule or an unwritten rule, that we have to change some of the letters around because we don't talk about that. I think we need to be braver because it happens. People do take their life. People do hurt themselves because the pain that they're going through needs to be relieved, and they need something more painful to take that pain away. And again, I choke up inside thinking about it, but it's true. I don't know whether you have any thoughts on families who might be scared about that or going through that or gone through that.
I do. I definitely, my family went through it, not so specifically about coming out, but generally my child's mental health, which I think was a result of years of feeling that I couldn't identify. And that's a long, complicated story. But yeah, I'm going to tell like just a little personal story, if that's
Please do.
okay. That I'm a learner. So I like, as soon as she told me and I recognized that I needed to be, um, I needed to evolve and I needed to figure out where my reactions were coming from and so on. I started reading and taking courses and going to support groups and watching documentaries and listening to podcasts. And in the maybe 2 months later, I attended a course that's available in Ontario called Families in Transition, where I learned, it was a 10-week program where I was going to be taught a lot of things, but I was still very much in resistance. To my daughter, I wasn't, but in my heart, I was like, how can I not have this happen the way it's happening? And the instructor shared the statistic that the suicide rate for trans kids was 40% higher than their peers. I mean, that is like, that stops my heart even now, stops my breath. I just can't even imagine. That's horrible. And then she said that the two things that bring that number down to the baseline for their age group are gender affirming care and perceived parental support, and if your child perceives you as only somewhat supportive, it doesn't affect it at all. Doesn't even go down 1%. It has to be that your kid perceives. Again, doesn't mean that you are 100% clear, but they have to feel that you are. And that was my watershed moment, that I sat in the room thinking, this is not, there's no other path now. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters that my daughter is in a group that is at 40% higher risk of losing her life, taking her life. And so I actually share that statistic liberally. Not on Instagram, because I believe that what you're referring to is the algorithm will delete your posts and hide your posts if you use the wrong language. And part of that, I think, is that they feel it suggests things. Although I don't know the difference between unaliving and that in terms of impact. But I tell families, because sometimes there's hesitancy around, do I need to get involved? And do I need to get supportive? And my answer is, the risk you take by being supportive is that perhaps you support your child right into an identity that might not have happened, although I don't believe that to be true,
Yeah.
but that's what they're afraid of. And the risk, if you don't, is that you may not have a child.
Yeah.
I don't need to be more certain.
I mean, obviously, I've heard that statistic, and I try not to think about it too often. But actually, what you've done there is put the icing on it. So actually, we don't have to accept that statistic. We can put that statistic down to the standard level, which we want to be naught. We'd love
Yes.
that to be naught, but we can do this. And there are two ways to do it. One, doctors out there, doctors, counselors, nurses, therapists, believe this person and help them to live in their identity, their true identity. And parents, I don't care if you get it or not, but make sure your child knows that you are supportive and that you believe them, and that you care for them and understand them, and whatever it takes, just get there.
Yes. And that's I think how my career, this second career, was born. Is part of me was reacting as a mom, and the rest of me, because in my career I worked with obviously thousands of parents of my students, and my favorite parents to work with were the ones that were struggling with their child's identity of various, like, behavior problems and autism. And parents often really have a hard time in those situations. And part of it is not getting enough support. But part of my mind went to, so what are that group of parents that aren't on board? If we allow them, if we exclude them from the conversations, which is what happens in high school, for example, if your child chooses new names and pronouns, brings up their identity, the parents aren't informed. This is in my province. And I don't think they should be informed. I understand the reason they're not informed. But if we just exclude them and don't talk about them, that stat doesn't shift.
Yeah.
Whereas if every single solitary one of them that even opens the door a little crack, and I've had people come to call me who basically want to just yell at me the whole time about how stupid this is, but I say to them, and yet you called me, and yet you asked to talk to me. So I know that there's a little opening somewhere. If there is even this much of an opening, I want to help them, and it's not for them. It's because that's the only way for that number to come to zero.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be them. It could be, for an older trans person, it could be their partner. It could be their child. It could be their best friend. But for most people, a parent is going to be at the top of the list.
Yeah, definitely.
Helen, can I ask you a question?
As many as you like.
One of the things that comes up quite a bit with parents is a surprise. And I'm not talking about very young kids, but teenagers. How urgently their child wants affirming care, wants hormones in particular. And they often say, I am 100% supportive of my child socially transitioning, but I don't understand why in a world where gender has become so much more open and expansive, they actually need to take this next step. And they don't understand why so many books and stories are about people who came out later. So they say, if Sarah McBride can wait till she's in her 20s, or if Jennifer Boylan can wait till she's in her 40s, why does my kid need hormones now? And I wondered if you have insight into why it's what the urgency is for teenagers.
I think it's a couple of things in my experience. One is that they've done their exploring. They've done their working out who they are and what they're going to be, and are they going to do this, and I don't want to do it again, I want to try out my birth gender again, no I don't, I am this is, and that takes a long time, and people don't realize that, do they? They don't realize it. And then when they make that decision, they do want it. And actually, it's not, I think it's so cruel when you're looking at your peers in your classroom and they are going through the right puberty, and you're not. And in the olden days, the Sarah McBrides we didn't know what puberty blockers were. We didn't have gender affirming hormones there. You just had to go through the wrong puberty. And maybe it wasn't even wrong in those days because there was nothing you could do about it. It was just one that all the other girls went through that one, and all the other girls got boobs and you didn't. And that sucked, but there wasn't anything else. But now there is. And they know it, and people say, oh, the internet has changed that world, and the internet has given them that what the internet's done is given them that knowledge, they know it's there. And I just think I know from cisgender children, we say that when they get to 14, if they haven't started puberty, it's too late for their bodies and too late for their brains, and we need to kickstart it. And I think if we had the same rules for transgender children, we'd do a really, really good job. So any transgender kid who thinks that the puberty they're going to get is the wrong one, let's make sure that we've got you on your proper puberty by 14, so that you can go through all those emotions that all the other girls and boys go through together in your classroom. And so I know it feels urgent, but it's urgent because A, they're ready, and B, they know the language and they know it's there when we didn't have the luxury of that before. And you said at the beginning about the heartache when that's going to be taken away. Imagine if you're on that gender affirming pathway that we've just talked about, that actually contributes to good mental health, and then all of a sudden someone up there goes, and
Oh,
now I'm going to take it away from you. But don't worry, I've got a mental health support line that might help you. It's just like, it's just nuts, you know. And then the other thing I think is, for parents, it feels like a scary step. It feels like the step that's irreversible. You can't go back. And actually that takes us back to that 4-year-old that we were talking about at the beginning. Look, do you believe your kid or not? You know, yes, this is irreversible. Yes, because that's what they want. And yes, because that's going to help their mental health. And yes, that's going to help them live their life so much more easily in their true gender identity. And yes, it's scary for you, but it ain't scary for them. They cannot wait. They cannot wait.
the other way. The other way is scary
Yeah,
for them.
yeah, exactly.
Horrifying.
Yeah, yeah. And what about this thing that you know, parents can make their kids trans? Mum, you're abusing your kid by going along with this delusion. That all that. What do you say to people like that?
Well, again, people who are coming to me, some of them are talking about they're accepting, but other people are saying that to them.
Yeah,
And it casts doubt. So we would be talking through what did they feel, what did they see, what did they understand, and what are these outside voices? How are they influencing them in a way that they need to create boundaries? I mean, I'm not immune. I often say, like a rule I have in my life is I don't debate about trans people or trans rights, including like if people want to talk to me about trans people in sports, I know right away that what they want is to cast doubt. And I am very committed not only to my opinions, but I'm even more committed to not wanting doubt cast upon me because I have a trans kid and want to stay on the path. So if someone's interested in influencing me otherwise, I just don't have the conversation. That's a hard rule for me. And I advise a lot of my clients to do the same. If they're hearing these voices, tell them enough. I don't have to listen, and I'm not going to.
yeah,
It causes me harm. For parents, the smaller group of parents who come with those thoughts that have I done this? Am I going to do this? Am I going to cause this in my kid? We talk mostly about detransition rates being so low, about how identity is formed, and most importantly, about their kid. What are they seeing? And 99% of the time, what the parent says is, my child is lighter, my child is happier, my child, since telling me and since exploring this, I'm seeing hope. Often prior to telling me, I saw the opposite, a decline in their mental health, their wellness, their motivation, their feelings about themselves. Parents who would tell me their child wouldn't bathe, um, you know, that shift. And often by articulating it, they become more comfortable and recognize how inevitable this is and how it's affirming something that is real,
but
not creating something that is artificial.
yeah,
Yeah. And then also breaking down some of the myths about how your attitudes can impact whether your child has this gender identity. And one, I have a video that I posted recently about the people sometimes say to me, you have a trans kid because you're a woke liberal. And I say the part that bugs me about that isn't you calling me a woke liberal. I could care less. I'm not offended, but also I'm not that easily hurt by trolls. The part that I hate about it is the implication is that trans kids are born to woke liberals. And that means that they aren't born everywhere else. And that's BS. They are born in every kind of family. It's how they're treated afterwards that is the shift.
yeah.
So if a conservative religious family can have a trans kid, they don't think they created it. So it can't be true for anyone else either.
No, I haven't got a trans child, but trans people and the people I've worked with have been some of the best people I have ever worked with. And as a doctor, I've worked with many, many, many groups of people, if you like, and individuals. And honestly, I've never had a better time than working with trans people, just beautiful, beautiful people. And when the world becomes a little bit less unkind, which it will, when understanding and tolerance and acceptability grows, it will. And then we can start moving on to the beautiful things. And the most beautiful thing for me is, how do we let trans people just live their lives with joy and success? And you talked about jobs earlier, jobs and education and relationships and love and families and all the things that we human beings want. And we're going to get there. We're going to get there.
We are going to get there. 100% agree with you that we're going to get there. And I kind of want to be in a time where there isn't coming out,
Yeah.
and there isn't anything. It's just, okay. I liken it to, at least in my world, when in PFLAG, for example, when someone will tell a story about 20 years ago, my kid came out as gay and it was really hard for me. And the younger parents are all kind of like, really?
Yeah.
They can't imagine that this is news, that your kid is gay, and
Yeah.
that's something you're going to think about very much. It's just like a small fact.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm kind of looking forward to that,
Yeah.
when we just don't even blink,
Yeah.
that it just is what it is. And
Yeah.
we say, okay, this is a fact about you, and how do we care for you in the best possible way, the same way we would for any other part of your identity.
Yeah. I'd love you to tell people what coaching does, because I understand counseling, I understand psychotherapy, I understand therapy a bit, but I don't understand coaching. So tell people what coaching can do to support them.
Yeah, for sure. And coaching can work really well in tandem with some of the helping modalities you just described. So when I'm talking to a potential client, what I'm always, the parallel I'm drawing is, coaching is a bit like physiotherapy. We already know where you're at. And that may have happened through work with a doctor, through your relationship with your kid, through psychotherapy. But you figured out where you're at, and that might not be a super comfortable place that you are, that, parents are coming to me with this difficult turmoil that they are experiencing. And then we figure out where you want to go. So a physio, that would be, you have a frozen shoulder and you want it to be mobile. In coaching, it might be you are feeling resistance, you want to get to a place of support, or you don't know how to tell your ultra-conservative family, you want to get to the other side of that, where they've been told and the chips have fallen where they might. The difference for what coaching does, like physio, is we start where you are and we're trying to get you to where you're going. So it's very goal-oriented, very practical and pragmatic. Of course, we delve into emotions, but not so much into, your childhood or where your reactions
Yeah.
come from. Much more where you are right now and how you're going to get there. It's always short term. So I honestly work with clients typically for 6 weeks, and then often at the end of, or 6 sessions. Often at the end of 6 sessions, we move to as needs basis. So people will reach out to me and said, something's happened, or we're about to cross another milestone. Can you help? And I jump on a call with them. But the 6 sessions is often enough to take parents where they want to get. And in fact, for some people, in the second or third or fourth session, they'll have a moment. It's a gradual process. Some have a moment where everything changes, and they go from this, kind of like I did around that statistic. It's like you see this pulling up of themselves, and they move into a different place in their own life, and the story shifts. So that's really the biggest difference. And then I think the other piece is, psychotherapists often do a lot of listening, and you do a lot of talking. And I also do a lot of listening, but I'm much more going to guide my clients towards the goal that they've identified in an overarching way, but also their goal of that session. So they never leave thinking, okay, but now what? Now what am I supposed to do? There's always a next step. There's always an action. Sometimes the action is do nothing this week, calm down and let the dust settle a little bit. But there's always some action at the end of a session.
Yeah.
So it's kind of results oriented,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's been amazing talking to you.
You too.
Keep popping up on my feed. I love your quirky glasses and cars and tips. We didn't even talk pronouns, but if anyone wants to know anything about pronouns and how important they are, then follow Ingrid on her socials. It's been a real pleasure. I hope we get to talk again, because there's so much
Yeah.
to do and so much positivity to have. Let's bring the beautiful, beautiful joy of gender diversity out there.
Thank you, Helen. I so appreciate it. And again, thank you for all the work that you do. You are definitely the person people turn to. So I appreciate that.
Well, lovely to talk to you, and I hope we talk again. If you've got questions after you've listened to this, please come over to my website, come and meet Sammy. They are there waiting for you. Answer any questions you might have. They know the truth, they understand gender diversity, and they are waiting to help you.